Hello everyone, I wanted to just do a quick little video here to get you started with looking at UV mapping. Now, as the documentation referenced, a lot of the poly models that you already have available to you, we do not need to actually go in and cut and sew as far as edges for your UV maps. So to give you a for instance here, like looking, for example, if I choose to bring out a polygon cube, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to enlarge this just so you can see it. But with this, you don't need to actually go along and create the stitches as far as the UV map is concerned here. With a lot of the base poly models, Maya already takes care of that for you. Instead, what you can actually look at here is you can come in and actually look at as far as the UV editor for the texture. When creating a UV texture, what you're taking into consideration is the edges as far as the overall design is concerned. To give you a for instance, to this point, if I come into Hypershade and I go ahead and I create another, let's make a Lambert. So I'll go ahead and type in Lambert. If you recall to this point in the class, if we wanted to just add a texture or material, we could just come in and click on the color, choose a file, and then come under and we can choose a different color here. So if I come into my downloads, I think I still have a pretty autumn. And you now have a material of leaves here, which I can then come out of the hypershade and so we'll go ahead and assign the Lambert material and then come up to the top here and turn on the texture. Now, this is fine that if we want to just do, a real quick material here, but if you want to have more details such as, looking like a box or looking like a barrel or having things align on the actual object, that's where you start to get into the UV mapping concept here. Now with UV mapping, Maya does offer you a UV mapping editor that you can access along the Poly Modeling tab all the way at the end here. You have several UV mapping options here, but one of them should look like a little editor window. And if you click on that, it'll actually open to show you what the texture currently looks like for the overall object here. But also what I'd like to draw your attention to, let me go ahead and make this a little larger, is how you have each of these individual, let me go ahead and actually turn on the shading here. You have each of these individual faces now aligned in your project here. In the UV toolkit on the right hand side, you actually have several similar options here where I can come in and I can actually select specific faces. And when I do that, and it might be a little hard to see here, but if you see whenever I'm clicking, you see how I'm also selecting that same face on the shape here, which means I can come in and move that around. Go ahead and Control Z that though. For right now, I would avoid doing that, but what you can do is you can marquee select all of the faces here, and this is something that you start out with UV mapping, whereby you may have the texture, but now what you can do is you can actually rearrange the object as far as the faces are concerned to match the texturing. So this is fine if you're working with like a standard material like we are here, but what if we wanted to have a little bit more detail? What if you wanted to have things that align specifically to these different faces here to actually make what looks like one unit of an object here? Well, that's now where you get into the material editing. I'll go ahead and give a brief overview on this, and we'll go more into this in another video. What I'm going to do first here, though, is I'm going to come back in and I'm going to go into object mode. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to reassign Lambert 1 to get rid of my texture in my UV editor. In the UV editor, up on the main menu bar, you do have an option called Image. I'll show you PSD at a later point, but the one for more generic editing is called the UV Snapshot. What the UV Snapshot is going to do is it's going to make a graphical image of your choice that will actually record the outline of the UV shell. So to show you here, if I go under UV Snapshot, And I'll go ahead and put this on my desktop here. Some things to point out here. Notice you can choose an image format. In my case, I chose a PNG, or you could choose a JPEG. And notice too, you can also choose the size as well. So I will go ahead and leave this on the default here. Finally, at the top, if you need to, you can browse to make the actual shape or the actual file. So I'm going to call this Square Demo. And then I'll go ahead and say Apply and Close. Now when I go out to my desktop, it's kind of hard to see here, so I'll go ahead and open this in Photoshop for everybody. You can also use GIMP for this as well. But if you go ahead and open this file here, so we'll do open with Adobe Photoshop. What this provided you with is the outline from Maya that you see here in the editor. So to show you here, to get working with this, one thing that you will want to do is either in GIMP or Photoshop is you want to add some sort of background color. You can remove the background color later if you prefer. However, what I'm going to do is I am going to do an edit fill. And it might be a little hard to see in the recording here, but here you should see now, you should see all of the kind of outlines for the overall design. So this allows me now, what I can do is I can use this as a guide and make another layer here, and I can come in and now I can actually do a little bit of a different design here where maybe I will grab some of these shapes real quickly just so you can see that I have things. You can also use a paintbrush. You could also use lines, you could also use other graphics if you're bringing things together. Completely up to you. So let's say though you get elements into each of your design layout here. And notice I'm keeping them within these squares here for the design's sake. Once you have it set how you want it, you can go ahead and just do a file save. I'll save a PSD just so I have a working format, but then I will also do a quick export as a PNG and save over that demo. There we go. Now, it is up to you at this point. We could actually remove the overall edges. So, you just have the layout there, so you're not carrying the edges over here. So I could do one more export if I wanted to. And now I can come back in to Maya here. Now before I can come back in and actually work with the UV editor as far as working with my material, I'm going to actually have to attach that material to a shader. So let me go ahead here. I am going to make yet another Lambert. And on this one, I'm going to go ahead and choose color. We're going to choose file. And this time what I'm going to do is on the desktop, I'm going to attach that. Now remember, because you're UV mapping this, the actual look of the overall texture really isn't that important here. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to assign existing material, we'll choose Lambert 3. And now if you go back into the UV editor, notice what has happened here. You can see now how overall all of the elements have been positioned perfectly on each side of your object here. However, that doesn't mean that I can't come back in here and using my face selection, for instance, and you can see when I move, you can kind of see in the background there, I'll shrink this down a little bit. You see how the shapes are also actually changing as far as they're wrapping on the object here. This is one nice time saver that Maya does include with its program here as far as getting started with the UV mapping, is that its ability that a lot of the base polygons are already UV cut and sliced for you to work with.